Hello YouTubers, my name is Thor. Today I'll be showing you my tips and tricks on how to plane resin. Now, resin, I've been doing it now for about 2 years and I love the product. I love how it really adds a new element to my woodworking. I do a lot of tables, a lot of resin. I do a lot of small items with it. It's very popular, it sells very well, but there are a few things that I've learned over the last 2 years, especially when it comes to planing these things. So I'm going to kind of share those with you. Hopefully it helps you. So the first thing I want to tell you is I start off every time with a brand new set of planer blades, and I want to use those because even though the resin is a hard plastic, it really dulls your planer blades pretty quickly. So as you'll take for example this charcuterie board that I'm getting ready to start working on. It's got a really nice finish when it comes out of the mold. It looks great, but you'll have some issues where you have some over spillage or maybe just a little bit below the surface. So what I want to do is I want to plane it flat as you would do any project, but you also sometimes run into a thing with a mold and you'll see it on the back. Sometimes you don't clamp your mold down just right and it leaks out underneath the back. And when it does that, it causes quite a bit of stuff. Now you can sand that off, but my goodness, it's going to take you quite a while. So it's just easier to run it through a planer. Now you have two options. You can actually run it through a planer, or you can use a router sled, which I'll show you an example of the reason why I would use a router sled. For one that I know that's really good and hard, like this purple one here, and I know it's good and solid, it should run through the planer pretty easy. But if you take one like this one here, for example, this one's been in my shop now for, gosh, I bet 2 months. And when we poured this, we poured it with a red, and as you see, it had a lot of spillage in the back. Leaked out underneath the mold, so now the whole back is pretty much a solid sheet of resin. So I will use a resin router sled to route this off with, because this is so much resin that if I run it through my planer, it's going to be, not only is it hard to on the planer, it'll bog it down, it dulls the blades real easy. But this one, for some reason, the clear coat, when we poured a small clear coat in to fill in, it didn't quite dry all the way, so it's a little bit tacky. First mistake I ever made when I started planing these boards down was the first one I did was not completely hard, and it was still a little tacky. When you felt it, it didn't feel bad on the surface, but once I ran through the planer and it got down about 1/16 of an inch, underneath of it was very tacky, and it gunked up my planer blade like nothing else. It tore up the rollers, got all sticky, it got the blades all gumped up. It was a mess. So that learning experience, I made sure that anytime I find a resin board that I'm getting ready to plane through, I want to make certain that it's very solid. If it's got any tackiness at all to it, I'll take it over to the router sled and I'll route this across this way and go the other side and just take that off. And then once I get it down to a good hard surface, then if I need to, I can run it through the planer. But for this example, we're just going to use this purple one here. One of the things I like to make sure is I want to, normal planing, when you're just planing wood, you can take a whole turn on it and take off a 1/16 of an inch. With resin, I want to make sure that I take off a little bit less than that, just for two reasons. One, it helps to keep the blades from getting dull, and two, it will, if you start running into tackiness in your resin pour somewhere along the line, you'll find it quickly. If you take off a whole big chunk of it, it may end up getting to that soft spot and it'll gunk up your blades. Another reason I like to take off small amounts is I don't want it to chip out any of the resin. So just barely taking any off, it helps it a lot. So I'm going to run it through the planer here a few times. I'm going to kind of show you what it comes out to look like. So just bear with me. I don't have any editing here, so you get the full video in real time. So here we go. Now, one other thing I want to tell you is when you're planing the wood, it planes through real nicely. However, once you start getting into the plastic, it's going to come out with some really long white strands, and those strands will clog up your planer pretty good, just like this. So I had to take my dust collector off because it sticks it up and it gets it so clogged up that it wouldn't pull. So what I have to end up doing is just letting it kind of free fall out, and then every so often, especially if you're planing a big resin board that's got a lot of resin in it, almost every time I pass it through, I have to end up cleaning out the exhaust just because it clogs it up so much. So you'll see that here in a little bit, and we'll try to walk you through it. Let's go. Side came out great. It's very smooth, don't have any tear out. This side is ready to be sanded. Now we have to do this side, and as you can see, it's got a lot of built up resin on it. So it's going to produce a lot of white shavings, and they are going to clog up my planer just like this. And every so often I have to stop it and clean that out. All right. I got the majority of it. There's still just a little bit here in the top, but I want to just use the belt sander and I can sand that off by hand. But this stuff is almost like static cling. It sticks to this wood and you have to really rub it before you run it through the planer again. And then kind of wipe it off. You have to keep cleaning out your blades like this. I usually use a dowel rod. After I shut it off, I'll take the dowel rod, stick it in there and pull that out. But it creates a huge mess. I'll tell you, this stuff it's beautiful when it's done, but it is extremely, extremely dusty. Wearing a dust mask is a great idea for this. Like I said, other than the fact that it creates a lot of mess and it can bog down your planer, taking short, small cuts is the best way I found that seems to take this planer off and clean it up really nicely. But I will tell you, let's do this one here just as a sample. We'll run it. No, I don't want to do that. That one's got too much resin that's still tacky on it. But we'll take one more here. Give me a second. So I have a small resin one here that we use as a cheese cutting board. And a lot of times what I'll do to make these thicker is I will put them in the mold and they won't even be planed yet. They'll be still the rough cuts. So it'll be a full 1 inch thick. That'll give me a little bit of play room so when I plane it down, because I want them to be fairly thick. Sometimes you'll get some that just has a lot of flaws in the wood and you have to keep planing it or whatever. But at that point, we want to make sure that we get it flat on both sides. This one has a little bit of spillage over on the back side. And the front side it's a little thicker on this part than it is on here, so it'll be great. So when you do the pour, it's always good to kind of see if you can get just a little bit underneath so that you're planing more of the wood than the resin. So let's plane this out. see it's starting to look a little bit like Christmas in here. We have a lot of white shavings, and they're going everywhere and sticking to me, so I've got quite a bit on me. But I think we've got it planed down, and I hope I don't have something marking my blades, but I'm already seeing little cut lines here, which means that something's hitting my blades already. So that is all I need to tell you today. Hopefully this helps you out. Hopefully that you won't be scared to try resin. It is a beautiful product, and it really can add value to your work. So until the next time, this is Thor. Have a good time. Thanks.